Welcome to Dachau, winter 1945. A camp that should have been empty, yet echoes of thousands of voices linger among the frozen barracks. Footsteps vanish before your eyes. Doors creak open and shut on their own. Shadows stretch across walls where no one stands. Some call them the lost, others the forgotten. Singular disappearances, fate unknown. Whispers of souls that never left. The air itself seems to carry their memories. January 1945. Dachau, Bavaria. Snow blankets, silent courtyards. The barracks abandoned yet vibrating with echoes of the past. The wind carries muffled cries, distant laughter, whispers of commands long forgotten. Allied forces advance, leaving behind only frost footprints and shadows. Prisoners, guards, civilians all gone yet somehow still present. The camp seems alive, caught between recorded history and lingering legend. Every corner tells a story. Every corridor hums with memory. Before we begin, leave a comment where you're listening from and the exact time you feel the cold grip of history. Share your location, your experience, and join the thousands of voices that still haunt these walls. Feel the silence and the whispers that never truly end. January 1945. Dachau, Bavaria. The camp lies under a heavy blanket of snow. The silence is deep, almost unnatural. Each barrack stands frozen in time. Walls, chipped paint, peeling doors slightly ajar. The chill air carries a stillness that is almost alive. No footsteps, but the memory of them remains. Footprints embedded in frost, frozen in the ground like ghostly markers. Soldiers report feeling watched, even when alone. A singular presence, an invisible weight pressing on the chest. The Allied advance moves slowly south. Reports filtered through radio and dispatches speak only of empty structures. The camp is marked as abandoned. Yet those who enter speak of sounds, whispers that seem to follow. A low murmur beneath the wind, the creaking of floorboards without anyone crossing. The atmosphere is thick with tension. Each corner a reminder of lives interrupted. Journals recovered decades later note the same observations. An officer's diary mentions a sense of being observed, shadows shifting without light, voices beneath the snow, voices that speak in memories, not words. Outside, the frost cracks under the weight of unseen feet. The barracks are lined in perfect rows, yet the emptiness feels deliberate. Every building a witness, every window a portal into past suffering. Fact reports record the number of prisoners evacuated or lost. Yet folklore insists some never left, that the camp itself traps souls, lingering in corridors and under the frost. The air carries stories older than the structures, accounts of guards describing sudden chills, the sudden feeling of breath on the neck, the echo of laughter or crying when no one is present. A singular, inexplicable presence. Local villagers speak cautiously. Whispers passed from one generation to another. Children warned not to stray near the fences. Stories of shadows walking the perimeter. Voices calling names. Some say the spirits of those who vanished without record. A singular disappearance noted in archives. Fate unknown. Some captured in photographs but later removed. Others reported in oral histories, never officially confirmed, yet persistently remembered. Inside the camp, the barracks interiors tell their own tale. Beds overturned, blankets frozen stiff, personal effects scattered, diaries, letters, small trinkets. Traces of human life abruptly halted. One journal found decades later recounts a prisoner's final days, descriptions of frostbite, hunger, and fear, of voices in the night, speaking in tongues the prisoner did not know, perhaps memories of the lost, perhaps echoes of the past, fact and folklore entwined. The administration buildings show signs of hurried departure, documents strewn, ink still wet in some cases, instructions half-written, orders lost, names unrecorded. Yet folklore preserves them, the living memory of what the camp demanded, the weight of authority, brutality, and despair. Every barack a silent witness, every corridor a channel for lingering dread. Soldiers note rooms that feel colder than the rest. Sudden drops in temperature, the air thick with unseen presence. Even as snow falls, the camp breathes. Wind through hollow chimneys mimics sighs. Doors swaying without touch. Furniture shifting inexplicably. The soundscape of memory. The soundscape of fear. Eyewitness accounts note lights flickering when no current runs, shadows that dart across walls in ways impossible. The camp's geometry becomes a labyrinth, corridors twisting in perception, a hall that seems longer than memory allows, steps that echo but return no sound. Reports collected decades later describe moments when personnel felt compelled to leave. A single scream echoing through an empty building, footsteps chasing them through halls, objects moved from one room to another, beds overturned, diaries open on random pages, stories claim figures appearing at the threshold, watching, waiting, and then gone. Some are never explained, fact and legend overlapping, inseparable. Outside the perimeter, the snow absorbs sound, each crunch deliberate, each gust of wind a whisper. Soldiers stationed nearby speak of nights disturbed by faint calls, names called softly, for the lost. Some swear the air itself murmurs prayers, others swear it mocks the living. A singular, persistent reminder. The camp refuses to be forgotten. History and memory entwined. Archives record dates, numbers, names. Oral tradition preserves tone, cadence, fear. The forest nearby adds its own layer. Trees bending in unnatural patterns. Shadows stretching over paths. Footprints in snow that appear and vanish. Local folklore speaks of spirits wandering the woods, drawn to Dachau, guarding the camp, punishing the trespassers. Folklore names figures that appear to those who dare enter, fleeting glimpses of humanity lost, yet strangely recognizable. Inside the main barracks, walls are lined with inscriptions, scratched names, dates, messages. Whispers claim some markings appear overnight, others fade with daylight. Some rooms resist recording. Cameras capture empty space. Yet those present swear the feeling of being surrounded, of hundreds, of thousands, watching, breathing, waiting. Fact and folklore merge, history incomplete, memory alive. Through all this, the snow continues, muffling sound, preserving silence. Yet voices linger, laughter cries, whispers, sighs. Doors closed but echoing steps, beds empty but impressions visible, papers scattered but meaning lost, an entire camp of stories frozen in time, some documented, others only remembered. Fact layer provides numbers, dates, official events. Folklore layer provides rhythm tone presence, the spectral cadence of Dachau, and so the camp stands, silent yet not, abandoned yet alive, a place where the dead and the living share air, corridors stretching into memory, barracks echoing stories, voices that defy explanation, singular disappearances documented, fate unknown, shadows moving, wind sighing, footsteps echoing, a reminder that history is never truly gone. It lingers, in snow, in walls, in whispers, in the mind. The barracks at Dachau tell a story that official records can only hint at. Hundreds of names etched into ledgers, the number of prisoners recorded and yet incomplete. Reports mention singular disappearances, fates unknown. Prisoners who simply vanish from the lists. Files with ink barely dried, yet missing pages. Orders crossed out. Notes left unfinished. A camp meticulously documented in paper, yet chaotic in memory. Diaries recovered decades later reveal the human side. Voices captured in cursive lines. One prisoner wrote of frost creeping under his thin blanket, of a low murmur beneath the wind. Voices speaking his name in the night. At first he thought it hallucination, exhaustion, or cold. Then he realized others heard it too. Whispers not confined to any single barrack. A spectral chorus. Fact and fear intertwined. Guard reports also hint at anomalies. Objects moved when no one was present. Doors opening and closing without touch. Footsteps in corridors when the camp was empty. Lights flickering in administrative offices. Shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally. Officers described rooms feeling colder than the ambient air. Sudden drops in temperature with no explanation. One report notes the barracks seemed to breathe. A pulse of memory beneath the floorboards. The air thick with the presence of those no longer living. The camp's layout adds to its eerie reputation. Corridors aligned in perfect rows, yet perception bends. Some describe halls stretching further than architecture allows. Rooms that appear longer or narrower than memory recalls. The geometry of the camp seems to shift in the mind. A living maze of stone and timber, where fact and folklore blend. The official map shows empty spaces. Oral histories fill them with voices. Laughter cries, prayers, whispers, sometimes pleading, sometimes warning. Inside the prisoners' quarters, small artifacts remain. Letters, trinkets, diaries, objects frozen in time. Some claim these items move, changing places overnight. Folklore describes the camp as haunted not by spirits alone, but by memory itself. The weight of suffering, injustice, and loss. An energy that resists erasure. Visitors report feeling compelled to leave quickly. A chill that penetrates deeper than the winter air. Footsteps chasing them through empty halls. A sensation of being watched by countless unseen eyes. Outside, the snow transforms the landscape, muffling sound, preserving silence. Yet even here, voices linger. Names called softly through the wind. The rustle of trees echoing cries. Footprints in the frost that appear, then vanish. Local legends speak of spirits wandering the perimeter. Figures glimpsed in peripheral vision. Fleeting, ungraspable. Watching those who dare approach. Folklore says they are guardians of memory. The lost, the forgotten. Keeping watch over the camp. The administrative records and archives provide the factual skeleton. The numbers, the dates, the official transfers. Yet they cannot convey what those who survived speak of. The atmosphere thick with tension. Corridors that hum with memory. Floors creaking under invisible weight. Whispers that persist in empty rooms. Letters found decades later speak of nights spent listening to voices, counting them, questioning reality. Some claim names spoken in the dark, familiar, impossible. Prisoner testimonies mingle with these reports, recalling frostbite, hunger, despair, yet always mentioning the voices, footsteps that preceded the wind, laughter that echoed when no one was near, shadows in corners, eyes staring from darkness, some described as faint silhouettes of men, women, children, others as amorphous shapes, impossible to identify. Some went so far as to swear these shadows were memories of those who vanished, that the camp itself refused to let them go. Objects left behind further the legend. Beds overturned without cause, diaries open to random pages, ink still readable, photographs capturing empty rooms. Yet eyes in the glass seem to follow. Folklore layer insists the camp is alive, not in flesh but in the resonance of memory. Each frozen step, each echoing shout, each whispered name, a note in a spectral symphony, fact and legend weaving together, indistinguishable. Local accounts from villagers reinforce this. Stories passed down, warning children to stay away. Tales of figures moving along the fences at night, shadows that step in and out of light, whispers carried on the wind, names called in the dark, sometimes pleading, sometimes accusing. Folklore preserves the stories omitted from official reports, the lives erased, the disappearances never recorded, yet remembered. Even decades later, personnel who visited the camp speak of unexplained phenomena, doors closing behind them, lights flickering, impressions of footsteps in empty rooms, objects shifting without touch, a cold presence in certain halls, rooms that seem to resist measurement, bending perception. The camp itself a labyrinth, a place where the living and the memory of the dead collide. Fact and folklore fused, history incomplete, yet present in every shadow. And through it all, snow continues to fall, muffling sound, preserving silence. Yet voices endure. Laughter cries, whispers sighs, doors closed but echoing steps, beds empty but impressions visible, papers scattered but meaning lost, each barrack a stage, each corridor a channel for lingering dread. The camp stands silent, yet not abandoned, yet alive, every detail recorded, every shadow remembered, a singular disappearance noted, fate unknown, a pulse of memory that refuses to be forgotten. Dachau in winter, a frozen landscape, yet alive with memory, corridors echoing stories, voices defying explanation, shadows moving in impossible ways, wind sighing, footsteps echoing, traces of lives that remain, fact and folklore intertwined, a spectral resonance that fills the air, each visitor sensing the weight, each whisper a note in a symphony of the lost. The camp endures, not merely in stone and frost, but in memory, in shadow, in voice, in the unending echo of history. As winter deepened over Dachau, the camp seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Shadows moved where none should. Footsteps echoed in empty halls. Objects shifted without explanation. Guards stationed nearby whispered of sudden chills. Doors that slammed closed with no one near. Lights flickering in unison. Yet no electrical source remained. The snow outside muffled sound. Yet voices carried, faint, persistent, naming the absent, the lost, the singularly vanished. Reports filtered through command channels, instances of prisoners disappearing without trace, paperwork incomplete, entries crossed out, names missing from rosters. One officer recorded a mysterious absence, one barrack reported empty, yet bunk beds still warm, blankets disturbed, personal items left on tables, journals open to pages that seemed recently read, fact meeting anomaly, reality bending into uncertainty. Among those who survived, stories grew. The whispers in corridors described as voices calling names, cries for help, laughter impossible to place, sometimes mimicking the living, sometimes distorted, like memory itself mocking the present. Prisoners claimed shadows followed them, shapes in peripheral vision, never clear, always moving. The camp became a labyrinth, geometry shifting with perception, a place where time and space seemed unstable. Outside, the perimeter told its own tale. Footprints appeared in fresh snow, vanished by morning. Trees bent unnaturally, branches scraping walls in patterns resembling gestures. Locals spoke of shapes gliding along fences, warning children away, calling names. Some claimed the spirits of the vanished, guardians, watchers, punishing those who entered uninvited. Whispers of forgotten events, of singular disappearances, fate unknown. Inside, the administrative offices revealed more anomalies. Files moved, papers shredded, pens placed back as if someone had written. Yet no handwriting remained. Photographs showed empty corridors, yet shadows appeared, impossible to identify. Fact reports noted temperatures dropping sharply, rooms colder than the outside. Officers described a weight in the chest, a presence unseen, breathing with you, watching your every move. Memory and myth entwined. The barracks themselves held incidents, beds overturned, diaries left open to cryptic pages, letters folded in strange patterns. Prisoners wrote of hearing orders in languages unknown, commands whispered, echoing, repeating. They swore they saw figures at thresholds, watching, waiting, then gone. No trace, no confirmation. Folklore names these figures the camp keepers, shadows of those who vanished, yet tethered to place. One particular barrack, known as Block 27, gained notoriety among survivors. Lights that dimmed and brightened rhythmically, doors opening on their own, faint laughter, cries, a child's voice calling out in despair, singular disappearances recorded in logs. Yet folklore claims hundreds vanished, some for hours, some never returned. Staff claimed to feel a presence, always behind, breathing, observing, dampening morale, instilling dread. Beyond the barracks, the forest seemed to join the phenomenon. Trees moving unnaturally, branches pointing inward, footprints in snow that appeared and disappeared, animals avoiding certain areas. Locals swore figures wandered there at night, translucent, human-like. Observers reported lights glimmering in darkness, figures vanishing at first sight. Folklore insisted these were the lost, unable to leave, tethered to camp, guardians of memory, echoes of suffering preserved. Incidents also involved communication lines, radio signals interrupted, static hissing, voices bleeding through channels, words understood, names called, warnings or perhaps pleas. Officers recorded interference, never explained. Some insisted the voices were echoes of previous transmissions, repeating, distorted, fact and legend becoming inseparable, each layer reinforcing the other. Snowstorms amplified the sense of isolation. Footsteps swallowed, calls carried. Some nights, guards reported hearing voices calling out familiar names, sometimes of prisoners, sometimes of colleagues. Singularly vanished figures, air thick with memory. The wind seemed to carry orders, then responses, a dialogue across decades, between those present and those who were lost. Inside the camp, strange objects appeared. A chair moved, blankets rearranged, papers stacked, sometimes opening to pages with nothing written, sometimes revealing entries in invisible ink. Stories claim the invisible hand of memory or the unseen presence of the vanished. Folklore insisted the camp itself was conscious, a vessel of history, a conduit of suffering, a stage for unfinished narratives. Reports mixed with oral history describe figures glimpsed in hallways, guards and prisoners alike, sometimes clear silhouettes, sometimes shifting amorphous forms, always fleeting, always observing, never fully grasped. Some claimed recognition, faces of those recorded missing, yet impossible to confirm, a singular, persistent motif, the camp refusing to release its dead, or the memory of the living. Even decades later, visitors recount inexplicable sensations, doors closing behind them, lights flickering, floors creaking under unseen weight, a chill pressing on the chest. The hallways stretching longer than memory allows, shadows bending angles, an echo of life interwoven with absence. Fact layer gives names, dates, files, folklore. Layer fills the gaps, shadows, whispers, impressions, voices. The camp persists as a monument of memory, of suffering, and of mystery. Winter deepened, the snow muted sound, yet the voices endured. Footsteps, whispers, laughter, cries. Doors closed but echoing steps, beds empty yet impressions visible, papers scattered yet meaning lost, each barrack a stage, each corridor a channel for lingering dread. A place abandoned, in fact, yet alive in memory, singular disappearances, fate unknown, shadows moving, wind sighing, footsteps echoing, a reminder that history is never fully gone. It lingers, in snow, in walls, in whispers, in mind. Dachau in 1945, a frozen landscape, yet breathing with memory. Corridors echoing stories, voices defying explanation, shadows moving impossibly, wind sighing, footsteps echoing, traces of lives that remain. Fact and folklore intertwined, a spectral resonance filling the air, each visitor sensing weight, each whisper a note in the symphony of the lost, the camp enduring, not only in stone and frost, but in memory, in shadow, in voice, in the unending echo of history. As the winter of 1945 continued to grip Dachau, the camp's presence seemed to seep beyond its walls. Whispers followed the wind into the surrounding forest, shadows stretching into the snow-covered fields, traces of memory leaking into the landscape, reports of footsteps in the woods, footprints that appeared overnight, vanished by morning. The local villagers spoke cautiously, stories passed down in hushed tones, warning children not to venture near the fences, shadows gliding just beyond sight, names called softly in the night, echoes of the singularly disappeared, fate unknown. The bridge begins here. Dachau was not isolated in its mysteries. Similar incidents appeared elsewhere. Other camps abandoned or partially evacuated. Silent corridors filled with voices that should not be. Whispers of lost prisoners. Figures glimpsed in peripheral vision. The living encountering the presence of the vanished. A recurring motif memory persisting beyond death. Across Europe. Across time. Fact and folklore entwined. A pattern emerging from tragedy. A reminder that places soaked in suffering retain it. That memory is sometimes palpable, almost physical. Inside Dachau, the barracks continued to pulse with invisible life. Doors creaking open and shut without wind. Blankets shifted. Papers scattered. Diaries open to pages that seemed freshly read. The atmosphere thick with the echoes of human presence. Guards and officers reported sudden chills, heartbeats racing without explanation. The cold pressing deeper than winter air. a presence unseen yet undeniable. Eyewitnesses swore of figures at thresholds, watching, waiting, moving just beyond clarity. Fact layer records names, dates, disappearances, folklore. Layer preserves the shape of absence, the tension of the unseen. Outside, the forest surrounding the camp added its own layer of uncertainty, branches scraping against barracks in unnatural patterns, footprints appearing and vanishing in snow. Villagers claimed lights glimmering in the trees at night, translucent figures wandering, sometimes resembling prisoners, sometimes unidentifiable. Some insisted these figures were drawn to the camp, unable to leave, tied to memory. Guardians of what remains, echoes of suffering preserved. A living bridge between fact and folklore, between history and legend. Stories of anomalies spread beyond Dachau. Letters recovered decades later told of nights spent listening to voices, counting them, questioning sanity. Prisoners noted whispers repeating orders in unknown languages, commands echoing in empty corridors, laughter and crying in the dark, footsteps following them, doors closing without touch, shadows shifting along walls, shapes that were human or not. Folklore insisted these were spirits of the vanished, tethered to place, to memory. The camp itself a conduit, a container of unfinished narratives. Even officers documented events that defied explanation. Objects moved, chairs overturned, papers rearranged, windows fogged without cause, lights flickering, the temperature dropping sharply in specific rooms, a heaviness in the air, a sense of being watched. One report noted the barracks breathe, the walls speak, the floorboards hum. One cannot escape the impression that those who vanished remain, observing, marking the living. Fact layer provides the skeleton. Folklore layer gives it flesh. The camp alive in shadow and sound. Beyond the immediate perimeter, incidents were equally strange. Snow-muffled sound. Yet voices carried. Names called softly. Footsteps echoing where no one walked. Children of local villages told of spectral figures, glimpsed from windows, or at the edge of forests, some solid, some fleeting. Lights glimmering. Shapes that vanished at first glance. Folklore preserved these encounters, never recorded officially. A persistent motif memory refusing to leave. The singularly vanished leaving traces in the living world. Inside, the administrative buildings continued their silent testimony. Scattered files, documents incomplete, orders crossed out, names missing. Some rooms colder than the outside, objects displaced, doors closing, floors creaking, shadows dancing across walls. Officers described feeling a weight on the chest, a presence unseen, breathing with them, observing every movement, memory and legend converging, corridors bending perception, a labyrinth of time and trauma. The snowstorms amplified the tension, every step muffled, yet voices persisted, echoes following the wind, whispers of prisoners long gone, sometimes imitating the living, sometimes distorted, footsteps echoing, laughter, cries, sighs, objects moving, beds overturned, papers scattered, diaries open, letters folded, ink appearing and disappearing. Folklore insisted this was the camp alive, memory preserved, the camp itself a participant, shaping perception, controlling attention, asserting presence. The motif extended further. Prisoners recounted figures glimpsed in hallways, Shadows in corners, sometimes human, sometimes amorphous, fleeting, impossible to identify, yet recognizable. Faces of those recorded missing, impossible to confirm. Memory made manifest. Dachau not merely a site, but a container of echoes, a bridge between past and present, the living and the vanished, a singular theme running across incidents, across time, fact and folklore inseparable. Even decades later, visitors reported similar phenomena: doors closing, lights flickering, floors creaking under unseen weight, sudden chills, hallways stretching longer than memory allows, shadows bending impossible angles, the impression of being watched, the camp itself as a living, breathing bridge, connecting lost memory and perception. Fact layer gives names, folklore layer gives presence. Dachau persists in the imagination, in memory, in shadow, in voice. And so the bridge holds, linking singular disappearances to unseen presences, corridors to forests, barracks to legends, snow to whispers, objects to memory, voices to time. The camp stands as a conduit, an echo chamber, a reminder that suffering and memory endure. Dachau's shadow reaching beyond its walls, connecting story to story, fact to folklore, history to perception. A place where the vanished continue to mark the living. The winter deepens, the snow falls, silence thickens, yet voices endure, footsteps, whispers, laughter, cries. Doors closed but echoing steps, beds empty yet impressions visible, papers scattered yet meaning lost, each barrack a stage, each corridor a channel for lingering dread, a singular presence, fate unknown, shadows moving, wind sighing, footsteps echoing, a reminder that memory never leaves, that the bridge between fact and legend is never broken, that Dachau, frozen in winter, yet alive, endures, in shadow, in voice, in the unending echo of history. The winter deepened over Dachau, snow piling on the barracks, frost creeping into every corner. Yet the camp did not sleep. The echoes of the past grew louder, footsteps resounding in empty corridors, whispers threading through the air, doors slamming with no one near, objects shifting on their own, the cold pressing into bones, a presence unseen, watching, waiting. Reports from soldiers and officers became increasingly unnerving. Files found scattered, papers moved, beds overturned, rooms colder than the surrounding air. One officer wrote, "I felt the eyes of hundreds upon me, yet no one was there. The walls seemed to breathe, the floorboards hum. I could not escape the impression that those vanished still walked these halls." Fact layer recorded numbers, names, disappearances, yet it could not capture the weight, the tension, the invisible chorus of the lost. Prisoners' diaries recovered decades later told stories of hallucinations, or perhaps not. Voices calling names, commands repeated in unknown tongues, laughter and crying in empty rooms, shapes flickering at the edges of vision, shadows bending in impossible ways, corridors stretching beyond logic, rooms folding in on themselves, the geometry of memory, fact and folklore entwined, reality blurred, the camp alive, haunted, resistant to understanding. Some barracks held singular events. One night a group of prisoners reported a figure standing at the doorway, silent, indistinct, yet unmistakably human. its eyes hollow. It did not move, and then vanished. No footprints, no trace. Records later noted a missing prisoner. Fate unknown. Folklore insisted the figure was a guardian, the spirit of a vanished inmate, tethered to the camp, preserving memory, punishing the living for intrusion. Outside, the snow absorbed sound, yet voices carried, soft, persistent, repeating names, footsteps echoing across empty fields, trees bending unnaturally, lights appearing in darkness, figures glimpsed in fleeting moments. Villagers spoke of apparitions walking the fences, drifting along the edges of the camp, some solid, some translucent. Folklore insisted these were the lost, tethered to Dachau, unable to leave, watching the living, echoing memory. Inside, the administrative offices revealed further anomalies, documents shuffled, papers rearranged, pens placed back after writing, ink appearing on blank pages. One officer's report mentioned sudden cold, a heavy weight on the chest, the impression of being watched. Fact layer provided the skeleton. Folklore layer gave flesh. The camp alive with presence, history and legend entwined. Prisoners recounted nights of terror, footsteps that did not belong, doors opening and closing, shapes appearing and vanishing, voices calling out in despair or warning, beds disturbed, diaries open to cryptic passages, letters folded in strange ways, lights flickering, rooms warmer or colder than the surroundings, the camp's energy palpable, almost physical, a singular persistent motif. Dachau refusing to release its dead, the memory of the living trapped. Even decades later, visitors described inexplicable sensations. Floors creaking under invisible weight, lights flickering, doors closing by themselves, shadows bending impossibly, the feeling of being watched, corridors stretching beyond comprehension. Fact layer shows names, dates, numbers. Folklore layer shows the pulse, the breath, the lingering presence. Dachau endures in memory, in shadow, in voice, in the whisper of history. Incidents of disappearing objects became more frequent. Chairs moved, blankets rearranged, papers scattered, diaries opened to blank pages, ink appearing as if freshly written. Folklore insisted the camp itself orchestrated these events. Memory preserved, suffering retained, echoes of pain manifesting in the living world, each barrack a stage, each corridor a channel for lingering dread. Footsteps in snow appeared outside, vanished by dawn. Lights glimmered in the forest, shapes drifting in and out of sight. Local children warned not to approach. Villagers spoke of voices calling names softly, whispers of prisoners, echoes of guards, shadows walking the fences, the lost, the forgotten, the singularly vanished, fate unknown, the bridge connecting fact and legend, the past reaching out. Inside the barracks were alive. Objects moved, beds shifted, diaries open, ink appearing, shadows flickering, voices whispering names, commands repeated in unknown languages. Laughter, cries, sighs, footsteps echoing, shapes appearing and vanishing, figures at thresholds, watching, waiting, then gone. No trace. Memory manifest. Fact and folklore entwined. A spectral presence. The camp itself participating in its own history. The winter snow amplified the isolation. Footsteps muffled, yet voices persisted, echoing in corridors, whispering through the wind. Names called softly. Warnings, pleas, laughter, cries, shapes flickering at the edges of perception, light moving unnaturally, objects shifting, beds overturned, letters folded, diaries open, ink appearing, disappearing. Folklore insists the camp is alive, a vessel of memory, a container of suffering, a stage for unfinished narratives. The climax holds here, Dachau pulsing with the lives that were lost, corridors echoing stories, voices defying explanation, shadows moving impossibly, wind sighing, footsteps echoing, traces of lives that remain. Fact and folklore inseparable, a spectral resonance. The camp endures, not merely in stone and frost, but in memory, in shadow, in voice, in the unending echo of history. Winter has passed, yet Dachau never truly sleeps. Corridors remain lined with echoes, footsteps frozen in time, voices lingering, repeating names that are no longer recorded, shadows stretching across walls where no light should fall. The barracks silent, yet alive. The snow melts, yet memory persists. Every corner a witness, every room a chamber of remembrance. Objects remain, beds overturned, letters folded, diaries open, ink appearing and fading, traces of lives halted, yet enduring. If you listen closely, whispers ride the wind, footsteps pacing through empty halls, shadows shifting across walls, always moving, never still. Fact layer records numbers, names, dates, folklore. Layer preserves presence, fear, the pulse of the lost, a chorus of memory that refuses to be silenced. Outside, the forest bends unnaturally, trees groaning under the weight of snow, lights glimmering in the darkness, shapes drifting among the trunks, watchers from another time, figures tethered to loss, singular disappearances, fate unknown, names whispered softly, warnings carried on the wind, the living sensing the cold touch of history, the branches scraping the walls in patterns almost deliberate, each gust carrying fragments of memory, fragments of voices, echoes of lives that never left. Inside the barracks hold secrets, doors echoing footsteps that do not exist, objects shifting without touch, rooms colder than the surrounding air, blankets rearranged, diaries open to cryptic passages, letters folded in strange ways, eyes that seem to watch from corners, fact and folklore entwined, memory and presence indistinguishable, the past pressing against the present, corridors stretching longer than reason allows, shadows bending impossibly, every surface imprinted with stories, every floorboard resonating with absence. Even decades later, visitors speak of inexplicable sensations, cold pressing into bones, lights flickering, floors creaking, shadows twisting at angles impossible. The impression of being watched, footsteps following them through empty corridors, voices echoing, laughter, crying, sighs. The camp itself a participant, preserving unfinished stories, fact layer providing names, dates, numbers, folklore layer providing the pulse, the breath, the lingering presence of lives lost. Snow continues to fall outside, muffling sound. Yet voices endure. Whispers, laughter, cries, sighs. Doors closed but echoing steps. Beds empty but impressions visible. Papers scattered but meaning lost. Each barrack a stage, Each corridor a channel for lingering dread, a singular presence, fate unknown, shadows moving, wind sighing, footsteps echoing, a reminder that memory never leaves. The past is never silent. It endures, it watches, it waits. The forest beyond the perimeter seems to join the phenomenon, trees bending as if in conversation, footprints appearing in fresh snow, only to vanish by morning, lights shimmering between trunks, figures glimpsed for a heartbeat, observers unable to identify, some solid, some translucent, villagers warn of wandering spirits, tethered to Dachau, unable to leave, guardians of memory, echoes of suffering preserved across decades, the singularly vanished leaving traces in the living world. Inside, the administrative buildings continue their silent testimony. Scattered files, documents incomplete, orders crossed out, names missing, rooms colder than the outside, objects displaced, doors closing, floors creaking, shadows dancing across walls. Officers described feeling a weight on the chest, a presence unseen, breathing with them, observing every movement. Fact and folklore converging, corridors bending perception, a labyrinth of time and trauma, memory asserting itself over reason. Incidents multiply, objects moving on their own, beds disturbed, diaries open, ink appearing, disappearing, lights flickering, shapes at thresholds, watching, waiting, then gone. Footsteps echoing in empty halls, names whispered softly, cries and laughter mingling. The camp alive with the remnants of the past, memory becoming tangible, almost physical. A singular, persistent motif. Dachau refusing to release its dead. The memory of the living trapped. A spectral presence that cannot be explained. Even decades later, visitors report doors closing behind them, lights flickering, floors creaking under unseen weight, shadows bending impossibly. The impression of being followed, watched, measured. Corridors stretching beyond memory. Fact layer showing names, dates. Folklore layer showing the pulse, the breath. Dachau enduring, not only in stone and frost, but in memory, in shadow, in voice, in the echo of history. Before you step away, consider the stories carried in the walls, the whispers in the wind, the footsteps in the snow, the shadows that bend beyond understanding. Leave a comment below. Share where you are listening, the exact moment you felt the chill, the echo, the presence. Join the voices that linger. Remember, Dachau is more than stone and frost. It is memory. It is shadow. It is voice. It is history that refuses to be forgotten. You have just heard another file from Shadow Stories. If you wish to uncover more, subscribe, turn on notifications, step further into the corridors of history, and perhaps, when the snow falls again, when the wind carries voices through empty halls, you will hear them, calling your name. And as you reflect, ask yourself, when the silence grows too heavy, when shadows shift just beyond the corner of your eye, who is truly watching, and who has never left?